Last week, we started our series on Moses, and next week we're going to get to the burning bush story. I like that story. It's a great story. We got it. There's a little in the story of Moses. There's a little hiccup before we get there. And you know the story, but I want you to live it as if you read it for the first time. Have you ever been to a place in your walk with God where you did something that you know you weren't supposed to do, and you were very disappointed in yourself? Anybody there? Or you knew somebody that was who you looked up to spiritually, and they had a fall, and they kind of had to walk away from ministry or God, and it made you heartbroken. Anybody else have experienced that? 3 of us. That's perfect. Okay. 4 of us. But I love this story because it's a tale of 2 people, basically, in my opinion, because I like that, because you think that a hero of the faith is always on. You know, they're always got the right thing, got the answer. You know, somebody that is remembered like Moses as a hero of the faith who led the people of Israel out of Egypt. That's a spoiler if you didn't already know. But it's like it's a story that makes you want to go, yeehaw, you know, yeah, let's go. But then you look at a story like today, and it makes you go, boy, Moses, I'm really disappointed in you, my friend, my brother, you know, from another mother. But, you know, we saw last week the birth of a Hebrew boy named Moses, and it's such a great story because God is at work behind the scenes even when you can't see it. Have you ever read the Bible and figured out that you know stuff that the people that were living that time didn't know? Moses and the people of God did not know that God was going to take them out of captivity. What they knew was they were being beat. They were being enslaved. They were doing all sorts of like getting whipped every single day. Some people getting murdered. You know, they were going from house to house, grabbing every boy 2 years old and grabbing them and throw them in the river. And you know, they don't know where God is. But at the same time, we see Moses. God protects Moses, and for some reason, when he's born, they see that he's a very special little boy. As we all would if we saw any baby born. They're like, that's a special baby. Because as a parent, you see your child different than everybody else does. When I was born, I have a picture to prove it that I look like a little alien child. But my parents thought we were beautiful. Me and my twin brother were beautiful. You know? Because parents see their children through special goggles, if you will. And every friend of their parents like, you know, they're interesting. They look interesting. Because I was 5 pounds, whatever ounce. I was really, really smaller than a bag of sugar. But we looked like aliens. But Moses, he was perfect. You know, he was beautiful. And there's something about him that like everybody went, wow, he's got a special call in his life. And from a young age, Moses knew that God had called him to do something special. Now, he had grown up in the house of Pharaoh, so he had all sorts of cool stuff. So the main idea last week, if you missed it, you can go on YouTube and watch my sermon, but if you don't have the time, here it is. Even when you cannot see God at work right in front of you, if you're living in a fog, if you're living in a life where you cannot see God moving, and you can be spiritual, and you can love God, and at the same time go, where's God at? David did that. A lot of people did that. Okay? And so, even when you cannot see God at work, you got to realize that he's at work in your life behind the scenes. You just can't see it because you're seeing it from too close. Jesus, he can see things from 30,000 feet perspective. He's outside of time, and he can see how it's going to work out. He can see the pieces that you cannot see. And we get that through the story of Moses and the people of Israel. They couldn't see it because they were too close. But of course we can see it because we're thousands of years later, we can see it. So let me start this message with a question. I need some honesty. Anybody want to be honest? Okay. How many of us have ever been caught doing something you weren't supposed to? You got caught red-handed. Like you tried to be secret about it, and then you tried to cover it up and lie. Have you ever tried to lie about doing something wrong? You're trying to see if you can get out of it? How did that go? Not that good. You'd have to be a very good liar and a good storyteller to someone go, you know what? I actually believe you. But the majority of us, we'd go, yeah, I don't think I believe that for 1 second. Lydia knows that I have a tail. If I pretend to lie, She knows if I'm lying just by the look on my face. I have a special look on my face that shows up. God gave it to me so I couldn't lie. If I lie, she knows it, guaranteed. And I hate that. But how many of us, when we were little children, we grew up with a mechanism of look back and forth to see if anyone's watching and then do it, My brother, I remember he got some Skittles from the store. He didn't pay for it. He put it in his pocket. But I guarantee, because I was there at the store with him, and I was like, I was the better twin. Teachers thought I was the evil twin, but they didn't know the real me. I really did get told I was the evil twin. But anyway, that's beside the point. But he looked both ways, left. Well, this is right, but this is your left, Left, right, up, down. You're like, okay, put the Skittles in your pocket. And then when you get home, Mom finds out because Mom's got eyes all around her head. I guarantee that she did. And so we all have that mechanism today, even today, to look around. And why do we do that? Because we know what we're doing is wrong because God gave us a conscience. How many of us today, you've done so much wrong that your conscience doesn't exist anymore? Every one of us has a conscience. God gave you that. That feeling that you get, that you look around and going in the heartbeat and the sweat and you feel sick to your stomach because you know what you're doing is wrong. And not only do people find out, but God knows. So Moses is a story of great protection, of God, a miraculous birth and protecting a little baby named Moses. And it's such a wonderful story. It's a story of Moses and God going, you got a call in your life. Then something happens in one verse. They say time, is it true that time goes fast in your life? Does every year go faster and faster? Okay. One verse in the book of Exodus is 40 years. It's like you snap your fingers and it's 40 years later. I'd like to know about between that. That's just me. Now, there are some Jewish tales of what happened when he was growing up, but we know that something happened when he turned 40 years old. It's a major sin. And can I be honest? All sin is major. All sin is deadly. All sin it separates you from God. But if there were there's not, but if there was a sin chart, this would be on the top. This would be one that we know he needs to go to prison for life. And if you believe this is not about the death penalty, but if you believe in the death penalty, maybe he deserves the death penalty. I don't know. But he does something that we at least would go, you know what, I can't really I can't associate with you anymore, Moses. We used to be friends. We used to do something, we used to be brothers, and you did something like that. I can't associate with you. In fact, you need to go to prison. But I want to say something about Moses' sin that might change the way that you view God. Now, I got to be very clear about this. Your sin separates you from God. Your sin slows down the plan of God, and it takes God's plan, and it definitely stalls what God has intended in your life. Can we all agree with that? That sin is not okay. It never is okay. God doesn't turn a blind eye. He'll allow the call on your life to happen, but sometimes it's 40 years later, as it is in Moses' time. But I would like to say something about Moses for a second that really, I knew this, but it really impacted me because I've known people, I've known ministers, and it seems like it's a lot more lately, where ministers are caught doing something they're not supposed to do, and they either run away from God, or at the least, they quit their ministry, never to be serving God in ministry again, and sometimes it's for a good reason. But I want to say something about Moses, that he was caught doing something evil, wicked, horrible. If I was God, I would disqualify him from ministry. I would disqualify him from service. I'd be like, God, I'll let you go to heaven, but I'm not going to let you do anything on this earth anymore because of what you did. But can I be honest about Moses? God did not disqualify his calling on his life. Okay? He did not take away that calling that Moses had for his entire life. God still used Moses, but here's the reality. It's a two-sided coin here. The other side of the coin is, God didn't disqualify him, but his calling was delayed. And for Moses, it was 40 years. And for some of us, we think it's 40 years too late. I like to think it's better late than never. But what would happen in Moses' life if he didn't do this? See, Moses, he grew up in Pharaoh's house. He had the best of everything, best clothes, best food, best education. He was very skilled. He had all sorts of teachers that would teach him great, wonderful stuff. That's why he almost knew everything. If something needed to be done, talk to Moses. You know, if you had a car, you don't have cars back then, but let's just say your carriage broke down and you're like, this wheel broke, how do I do it? Talk to Moses. Or, you know, about God, how do you know God, blah, blah, blah. Talk to Moses. Moses knows it. Moses has been taught by all sorts of different things, and then he sinned. Let's get to the gist of this story for just a moment, then we'll get to it in Exodus chapter 2. Moses grew up. He was vice Pharaoh. And I even thought about something that I didn't say last week. Not only was he second in command, he was next in line to be the Pharaoh once Pharaoh died. All these years, I hadn't even thought of that he could have been Pharaoh. I mean, that's pretty cool. Now, he didn't end up being Pharaoh. He ended up being on the run. But it blew my mind, like, he could have been Pharaoh. Wow, can you imagine a Hebrew, God-honoring person being in that leadership role? Now that was gone because he was on the run. But he goes outside one day. He goes away from Pharaoh in this palace, if you will. He goes outside and he just checks on his people because he knows where he's from. And one day he sees somebody, one of his people, maybe his own family member, getting beat. Remember last week what we said about the people that were in charge of those slaves? They were brutal slave drivers. They were whipping them. They weren't just mocking them and just talking to them bad. They were beating them. They were whipping them. They were killing them. And Moses sees what's going on. He goes, I can't let this go. I've got to have justice. I've got to step in. And so he defends the Hebrew, which I think we all would do. But he does something that maybe he shouldn't have. Let's not say maybe. He probably shouldn't have. He killed the guy, the Egyptian. And then he gets a shovel and he digs in the sand. I want you to think about Egypt for a moment. Everything that you think about Egypt. Okay? And then Moses standing there with a dead body next to him, digging, looking around. Okay, nobody's here really quick. Hurry up, get the body and throw it in the ground. Cover it up. Walk away really slowly. You know, so and the next day, he goes to bed, sleeps, has a good night's rest, but he's thinking about things. The next day he wakes up, he goes outside, checks on the Hebrews again, because that's his people, and he sees two Hebrew guys fighting, you know, like any guys do. They're punching each other like this is a real fight, a fist fight. And he tries to stop the fighting. Guys, stop. And then long story short, one of the guys that's fighting says, You're not my judge. What are you going to do? Kill me like you killed the guy yesterday? So he looked around left and right and killed the guy, but somebody from afar was watching. He got caught red-handed. He got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, like, I didn't do it. I got crumbs all over my mouth and everything, but I didn't eat the cookie. But he murdered the guy, and he was seen, and basically the guy said, I'm going to expose you for who you really are. You're a murderer. You're not vice Pharaoh. You're not the future Pharaoh. You're a murderer. And so this is huge. I want to be very clear again. Moses has a huge calling on his life, but he screws up, but he doesn't disqualify him, but it definitely delays him. I want you to, when you leave this place, I want you to remember those two things. Your sin has impact on your calling. It just doesn't disqualify you completely. What it does is delay what God really wants in your life. And God doesn't want you to delay what he has for your life. So let's look at the story. Exodus chapter 2, verse 11 and 12. It says, many years later. This is 40 years later. This is what happens in the step. You think your life goes fast. This is one verse. Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews. And he saw how hard they were forced to work. And during his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. Look at this. I like this. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching. Don't we do that still? Don't we do that? And we do whatever we're not supposed to do. After making sure no one was watching, people were always watching. And they proved it by those two guys that were fighting the next day. Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. Now, can we just be honest? That's not good. How many of us want that on our spiritual resume? A murder? I don't want any sin on my resume, but forget about it. If I'm murdering somebody, I'm going to prison, maybe for a long time. And that's exactly what Moses does. Where did Moses go wrong? Some people would say, well, he went right into and murdered the guy. That'd be the first thing. I want to rewind that for a second. Where did he go wrong? He was watching from a distance, and he went for a second. He went, I'm going to step into the situation on my own power. I'm not going to consult God. I'm not going to see what God wants from this situation. He does it what he should have done, I think, and this is very simple, but he had the power, remember his second command, to say, stop, and the guy would have to listen, or get the right people to take control of this. But he actually took over his own situation. He goes, I'm not going to talk to God about this. I'm just going to go right to the guy and take matters in my own hands. I don't know if you're guilty of taking matters in your own hands. But can I be honest? I'm willing to bet that when you take matters in your own hands, more times than not, you end up doing something you're not supposed to do, and things don't work out like you think they're supposed to work out, especially what God thinks is supposed to work out. If you take matters into your own hands, think about anything for a moment. Parenting, marriage, finances, emotions, whatever, your physical body. If you take matters just in your own hands and not talk to God about it, more times than not, you're going to actually figure out that you shouldn't have taken matters in your own hands. You're going to do things that you regret. I know that you don't regret anything. You know what I mean? Do you guys regret anything? And so here's 3 things I want you to consider. If you're in the middle of sin, if you're in the middle of making a decision to do right or wrong, okay, that's called temptation. There's 3 things. Number 1 is so obvious it almost doesn't need to be said. But we must involve God in our decision making. Is it normal for you to consult God when you're making a decision? If you have to make a decision in A and B, and God has definitely a plan for your life, do you consult God? Or you just go, I'm just so wise, I'm going to make the decision myself. I'm going to go based on my feelings. You ever made a decision based on feelings and you knew your feelings were wrong? Sometimes your feelings are wrong. Sometimes you go, I like this a little bit more than that, but what does God want? The second thing, this is really huge, but a lot of people don't do this next part. It's that we must involve the wise counsel of other Jesus followers. And I mean not just any random person, someone that we looked up to that has been through a few decisions their own self, and they're successful. They've actually looked to God. God has used them. Who is somebody that is actually pouring into your life that is giving you wise counsel? There are people in my life that I would consider wise, and I would go, I actually do value what they have to say a lot. And I have to go, okay, maybe, and they're not perfect. Anybody know that people are going to fail you, even those wise people? But sometimes God's going to say something through the person around you that's closest to you, a spouse, a family friend, a pastor, I had to throw that one in there, but we must involve the wise counsel of other Jesus followers. And the third one is something that Moses for sure did not do. He didn't do any of these, but he definitely didn't do the third one. And that is, we must trust that God will act. When you see something going on in your life that is not right, when you see that things are not going as planned, do you trust that God actually has control of your life and he's actually going to make it right? When he saw that guy, did he trust that God was actually going to give him the words to say? Because I don't know if God would actually say, hey, Moses, I want you to kill the guy and then bury the body, but don't tell anybody, I think God would have told him some words to say to the guy. Say, stop. You don't have any right to do that. We must trust that God will act. But Moses didn't do that. Look at what he did. We already saw this, but look at this. After looking all directions, take a moment just to look in all directions. Like okay, go ahead, yeah. Like you're looking kind of sneaky here. It looks like you've done that before, right? You guys are pretty good at that. I mean, you guys have had practice on that. Me too. Like you're doing something that you know is not right, and you're going, looking through the window a little bit. Is my cell phone recording me right now? Is anything on that's recording me right now? Wait, is the government recording me right now? But Moses, he looked in all directions to make sure no one was watching. He killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. Moses got caught even though he's looking both ways. I want to say something that you already know. Somebody's always watching. You know, especially non-Christians. Non-Christians are waiting for you to fail. That's not fair because they obviously put stuff all over your life that they themselves don't put over their lives. But they have every right to do that. You claim to believe in God. We claim to believe in God. We claim to know right from wrong and truth from fiction and all that kind of stuff that we will fail at different moments of our life, but do we make it a habit of looking over our shoulder, looking right, looking left, and then proceeding? This left and right thing is like temptation. Am I going to go through with it? You have a moment to think about it, to pray about it. And when you look both ways, that's a dangerous place to live in. God bless you. Where do you look both ways in your life? Maybe it's through your finances. You take out your wallet and you're looking both ways. Nobody knows how you spend it. You know, you just spend it. You know, maybe you go on the internet, you look at something that you're supposed to. You know, you look both ways. Maybe when you look both ways, and then you treat someone poorly. Because you know, as a Christian, I'm not supposed to treat someone really poorly, and I need to watch what's coming out of my mouth, but I got to make sure no one's watching first. And then we go on with it, you know. And so here's a game changer right here. Instead of looking left and right when you're tempted, like looking around, because can we all agree that we're all tempted I had someone ask me, and it was a weird question, but they thought that they wanted to know if being tempted was a sin. I said, no, Jesus was tempted. It's going through with it. Temptation, it proves that you're just human like anybody else, but you didn't go through with it sometimes, but sometimes you go through with it. And so when you're tempted, instead of looking around, you look up at God. You say, God, help me do the right thing. I want to honor you, God, and what I'm about to do is not going to honor you. What I'm about to do is not going to honor the people around me. It's not going to honor my family. It's not going to honor the church. It's not going to honor the kingdom of God. It's not going to honor me. It's going to bring everything kind of to a halt. It's going to make me step maybe backwards a little bit in my relationship with God. So God, would you help me to do the right thing? So, what are some guardrails? That's kind of a blurry picture. Could have got a better picture, but what is the purpose of a guardrail when you're driving? To protect you from going where you're not supposed to go. Okay? We went to Lewiston yesterday to watch him run cross country. Along the river, there's guardrails. Why are there guardrails? Because nobody in their right mind wants to drive into the river. And nobody wants to, they solve a lot of problems by putting guardrails there so that they don't have to go rescue someone or get the car out, that kind of thing. It saves a lot of time and a lot of heartache if you have guardrails. Those guardrails are there to protect you. What are some guardrails that you can put up in your life to protect you? Because if you live in the world, and if you're human, how many of us are superhuman? We're superheroes. You Superman? No. You know? You're not. I'm not either. So you have to protect yourself. How do you do it? Well, maybe in finances. This is a hard one because did you know that the hardest thing to talk with people about is finances? One of the hardest things to talk about. Especially if you're married, it's hard to talk about finances. You may be married to someone that grew up in a different kind of household when it comes to finances. And so you spend differently. You save differently. Some people are like really tight with their money because that's all they had. And some people are like, whatever. We can do whatever. There could be a happy medium in between. So it is a proven fact that the number one reason for arguing and divorce is finances. It's not the only thing, but if you've ever been married, you know the arguments of spending money. But maybe the guardrail that you can have with finances is you sit down with your spouse and you look them in the eye and say, let's have a conversation that's not going to lead to arguing. Let's have a civil conversation and let's get on the same page financially. This is where the bills are going. This is where this is going. This is how much we're saving. This is how much we're tithing. This is how much we're giving. This is how much we're giving to missions. I had to throw that one in there, but this is how much we're doing that. This is how much we need to pay that person. This is, get on the same page. That could be a guardrail. Maybe if you have an internet problem or a phone problem, whatever, a guardrail is to move your computer or your phone or whatever, your technology, into a place where you know someone's going to be with you. Think about if someone's next to you, are you going to go on certain websites that you're not supposed to? No. Let me just answer that. How about another guardrail? Here's an important one that we often don't do. When you're tempted to go like this, left, right, left, right. Oh, I got to look. How about a guardrail would be to pick up the phone and call a brother or sister in Christ? Someone that you can trust. And maybe you could say, you know what? Dwayne, I'm being tempted right now. Now that's humbling because I don't want to do that. How many of us want to do that? Hey, Dwayne, guess what? I really want to do this. Pray for me right now. Because if I tell Dwayne, or anybody for that matter, that I'm being tempted to do something, more chances than not, I'm probably not going to go through with it because somebody knows. Because every single time that I am tempted to do something wrong, not only am I thinking about God, but now I'm thinking about Dwayne's face right there in my mind going, nope, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. What would Dwayne do? WWDD, what would Dwayne do? That would be a guardrail. Every single time that you're tempted, if you really can't control yourself, pick up the phone. Text someone if you have to. Go somewhere. Take a drive and go stop by and see them. Help me. Like that kind of thing. That's a guardrail. So I want to prove to all of us right now that we all go like this. I want to play a game. And you could call yourself a super spiritual, going to heaven kind of person. I want to prove that you go like this from time to time. Now, we live in a small town. We don't have stoplights, but anybody, you go to Lewiston, you have stoplights, and okay, you're driving in a car in a big city, and there are stoplights, and when it's red, wow, you're good. How many of us didn't know that? Did you learn something? Okay. I remember when Hayden was little, he didn't know what stoplights were, so he's like, why you stopped? Because it's a stoplight. And he didn't know that. That was pretty cool to think that someone couldn't know what that was. Okay, so you're driving, and it's green. What do? You go. Wow, that's amazing. You guys are good. Now, you're driving, and the light turns yellow. What do? Okay, right? What did you say? Caution. Okay. You said step on the gas, right? Now, how many of us have ever, when you saw a yellow light, look both ways to make sure the cops aren't looking, you look in the mirror and see if the cops not behind you? How many of us have ever stepped on the gas and went through a yellow light turning red? Wade! Just kidding. We all have. And we look around even through it and we're like, okay, there's camera. Maybe they're taking a picture now. They might have my vehicle information now, like they're going to send me something. We've all done that. But I'm willing to bet that when it turned yellow, you kind of went left and right first, right? And you looked around for cops, right? Anybody else there? You didn't just go. You looked around, then you hit the gas. See, let me give you the legal yellow light thing. You're supposed to slow down and stop. That's legal. When it's yellow, you don't go. Legal means it's going to turn red. Caution, be aware that if you go, you're going to get in trouble. You might cause a car wreck. You're going to get pulled over for sure. So it means to stop, to slow down. It's going to turn red. Watch out. But we look left and right. Oh, there's no cops. I'm not going to get caught. And I'm guilty of that. You know I'm guilty of that. You know I'm guilty of that. And well, no one caught me. Think again. Look at what Moses did. Moses thinks he gets away with the sin. See, he let anger take over. Anger is an emotion that God gave you to help you. But sin, anger, can cause you to get to places where you're not supposed to go either. And he took anger and aggression, and this is not right. And even the right thing and going, that's what I see right here is not right. That's an injustice. I want to do something right about it. But he took matters in his own hands. Look what happened in Exodus chapter 2, verse 13. The next day when Moses went out to visit his people again, he saw two Hebrew men fighting. Why are you beating up your friend? Moses said to the one who had started the fight. The man replied, who appointed you to be our prince and judge? You're a Hebrew guy that's an Egyptian. This is not your job for us. We're our own people. Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday? Then Moses was afraid, thinking everyone knows what I did. You ever been there? Oh, man. I shouldn't have done that. Now everyone knows. Everyone knows. See, Moses sees something he doesn't like, but he doesn't look up to God and consult God. He looks side to side, and he's busted. Not only is he looking side to side now, but he's looking down. You ever do the walk of shame? You ever see your child do the walk of shame? You ever see your animal, your dog, do the walk of shame? You ever see your husband doing the walk of shame? Like, oh, man, now I got to tell, and I might have said this a while back, but this is the biggest lie I've ever done in my life, was when I was in college. And I've told this to some people, but I used to work in Sumner as a parks guy. I used to mow lawns for a park. It was a great job. But one of the guys at the cemetery was out injured, so he's out, and so they need someone to fill that position. And the boss, the manager of the cemetery, who lived right by the cemetery, was a family friend. His name was Fred. And Fred, he said, I want Joel to do it because he was a family friend. He went to our church. We used to go to his house all the time for dinner and that kind of thing. And Fred, he came up to me one day and he said, Joel, I want you to drive this. It was called a Gator. I don't know. It was a motorized vehicle that you can store stuff in the back. You can put bark and dirt and all sorts of tools. And he says, I want you to take this Gator full of tools, and I want you to take it over by there's a mausoleum. And I want you to go by the mausoleum, park it there, and keep all the tools there, and leave all the tools there, and we're going to work over there tomorrow. Oh, yes, I get to drive the Gator. It was so much fun. Drive as fast as you want. There's nobody in the whole cemetery going to bother you. You know what I mean? In that place, there were these things that popped out of the ground. They're called sprinklers. They would go pop, and then it would start, and then when it was done, they'd go down automatically. There was one that I did not see that had been stuck up, and I ran over it. I know. But not only did I run over it, that somehow it had broken the water, and so the water was shooting up. And I'm like looking around. I kid you not, I looked around for my buddy Fred, who was my boss, family friend, and I just, what am I going to do? I get off. I find the little, it's like a plastic black little round thing, and it just pops off, and I look for it. And I find the water valve, and I turn it off, and I put the head back on, and I leave it down. Now, I got back in the Gator, and I drove back to Fred, and I said, no, I didn't do that. I took the Gator, went back, parked it where it's supposed to go, walked back to the shop, and I just stood there, and I went, and then it was time to go. The next day, Fred, family friend, great guy. I've known him. I knew him all through my high school years. I've known, his daughter was the same age as me, so we knew each other. He said, I was like, is there something you got to tell me? Like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. No? Well, this is before I knew I had a lying thing. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I don't what are you talking about? Well, a sprinkler's broke. What's a sprinkler? What do you mean? I didn't do that. But I said, I don't know. He goes, Joel, I can prove that it was you. I don't know what you're talking about, Fred. Brought me to the spot, and there was tire tracks. And he literally got the gator, and he drove over there, and he said, measure that tire. Okay, it's that. Okay. Now, I want you to measure that spot on there. Gator. That's what it was. I sent you over there. It was you. I'm like, now, I wanted to do what Moses did, and I wanted to flee the situation, but I still had 8 hours. This is the morning, remember? And I was a college student. I go, this is not ministry. I want to be a pastor. I don't want to do this. He didn't fire me, because, he probably should have, but that's one of my favorite jobs, just not that day. See, when we sin, and especially when we're caught, it's so easy to run away from our friends and our God, and instead of doing the right thing and making it right and being honest about our stupidity, that was stupid, we flee. We run away. See, look at verse 15. Moses, sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened. In all reality, that guy, Fred, was the Pharaoh of Sumner Cemetery. He lived right by the cemetery. He literally had if you ever wanted to hear stories about horrible things that happened at cemeteries, he told us all sorts of stories that make me, it creeps me out even today. But sure enough, Pharaoh heard what had happened, and he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh, and he went to live in the land of Midian. Now, Moses goes from being famous and being a somebody to a nobody. He goes from being well-known and making decisions and the best of food, the best clothing. He is a somebody to being a nobody overnight. Just instantly done. He's running for his life, literally, and he stays in this land for 40 years. I don't know what it is about 40 years. Read the story. It's like 40 years from this to this point, 40 years from that to that point. It's weird. It is very, very, very odd. But he's in the land of Midian where he is a nobody. In fact, he becomes a shepherd. And I like the idea of shepherd. Jesus is known as a shepherd, and we get with the idea of shepherd. But in the Egyptian mindset, the lowest of the low was a shepherd. So he was low. He was the low man on the totem pole. He was literally nobody. And I want to end this message with giving you hope. Because I've known people who were godly people who had hidden sin. Who, when I found that out, I'm like shocked. Like, I thought these guys were perfect. I knew they weren't perfect, but it's like, I'm shocked to hear that they screwed up so bad that they're no longer being ministers again. Like, they're done. It's just shocking. And it's more times than not, it's like, it just breaks my heart. So instead of throwing this at you and going, man, you guys are a bunch of sinners, amen, let's get out of here, I want to give you some hope. Because I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. Sin will take you where you don't want to go. It will cost you more than you want to spend. And it will delay the promise and the dream that God has over your life. But the good news, that's the bad news, and you don't ever want to delay God's dream. Nobody does. But I want to give you hope. It will not disqualify you from ministry. Now, I will admit, let's say, for an example, an Assemblies of God pastor screws up. The Assemblies of God might not let you do the same thing again. But that doesn't disqualify you from doing the things that God wants you to do. For you guys and for me, say you're in the middle of sin, or you know that you're walking down a road you're not supposed to. You're not sinning, but you're definitely walking the way that you're not supposed to walk. What do? First of all, know that it's not too late because you're still alive. And it's not 40 years. Maybe it is 40 years later for some of us, but it's not 40 years if you're right in the middle of it. You could choose to stop right now if you put on some guardrails. See, and second hope, even in the middle of sin, God could use your story to reach other sinners. To say, look what God does to sinners like me. He saved me. He forgave me. He helped me walk away from that. I used to do this. God helped me walk away from that. That gives me hope. But now he's on the run. And you know the story. Don't ruin the story by saying, hey, this is how it ends, Pastor. I'm pretending I've never read it before. All I know, he's on the run. Okay? And God definitely took him down a few notches. He used to be royalty, and now he's a nobody. God, I believe, had to take him down a few notches to get the lay of the land because of what he was going to do later. He had to be with the people. He met someone, and he got married and had a child. He actually got to a place where he was content. He might have regretted what he did, but he did have some things that happened that were positive. But he's still on the run. We will learn that God uses nobodies to change the world. God rarely, there's a few people that you can think of that God used, and they were famous, they were good, they were well-known people, but the majority of people that are used by God you'll never know them. You'll never know them. Like the person who led Billy Graham to the Lord, there's this whole line of people that they have that this person led that person to the Lord. One of them is Billy Sunday. This person led them to the Lord, that person, and then ultimately Billy Graham. But Billy Graham's well known, and maybe Billy Sunday is, but the rest of them, I'm like, I've never even heard of them before. And so God uses nobodies to change the world. Now I want to close with these few verses because this is good news. Because in the middle of your sin, in the middle of horrible circumstances, in the middle of I feel like I'm running away from God and God doesn't care, this is what happens. Verse 23 through 25 of Exodus 2. Years passed. I mean, this chapter is really speeding through. It's like it's going through a yellow light. I mean, it's like, okay, what happened? He's a shepherd. He's a nobody for 40 years. Before we read the rest of it, have you ever felt like you were so disappointed in yourself that you felt like, maybe not 40 years, but you're like, where could I be right now if I didn't go through with that? I guarantee Moses did that every morning when he woke up. Ugh, I'm a shepherd. I could be Pharaoh right now. Because it goes, years passed, and the king of Egypt died. I'd like to let you know who would be Pharaoh right there. Probably, not guaranteed. But who would be Pharaoh at that moment when the Pharaoh died? It would I can't guarantee it. I can't prove it. But it's a good chance that it would be Moses right now, be the Pharaoh. But yet, he's in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. The king of Egypt died. But the Israelites continued to groan under the burden of slavery. They cried out for help. Look what happened. Their cry actually rose up to God. Now, that should not surprise you. God hears your prayers. But how many of us, when we're in the middle of our problems, we think, I'm going to put it in quotes, we think that God can't hear. You know? Their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he looked down on the people of Israel, and he knew it was time to act. 40 years? Time to act? God, have you ever told God he's too slow? God, God, if he were driving a vehicle and he saw a yellow light, he would stop the yellow light for 40 years. And you're like, honk, honk. What's up, God? Why aren't you going? I'm still behind you. Why aren't you driving? And God's just sitting there. He's going, hey, this is you. This is 40 years. To me, this is like, it's not my fingers and it's 40 years later. I'm not in any hurry. I want you to know that God's not in any hurry. 2,000 years after Jesus, he still hasn't come back yet. God is not in a hurry. And if you're in a hurry, you're going to be miserable. If you want to run through yellow lights in life and you just want to keep going and going and going and going, you're going to be miserable. Because you're going to be driving your life and God's over here. What are you doing? What do you do? Why are you driving the vehicle of your life? Stop the vehicle. Stop at the red light. Let me get in the vehicle and let me drive your life. See, he heard the groaning. Do you think it was the first time he heard the groaning? No. He heard it for 40 years. But then he knew it was time to act. Like the song says, he's never early, he's never late. But on our part, it takes courage and it takes faith. Trust him and see he's got all the power you need. So instead of having to watch and looking at God and going, you go, you know what? I don't like the timing that God has, to be honest with you, because most people don't. Because we want God to act right now. We want God to save people right now. We want God to heal people right now. In fact, if he could have done it yesterday, if he could have done it 40 years ago, I wouldn't be in the middle of this mess. Instead of that, put the brakes on, put the parking brake on. It's the reason I call it emergency brake. I don't know if you do, but pull that emergency brake and just let it be for a second. Stay at the red light and let God be the one that's actually leading your life. That's what Moses should have done. He didn't do that, but he learns the lesson the hard way. And don't you realize that that's probably the worst way to do it? But we all know from experience that you learn things the hard way oftentimes. And that's not God's intention. But God still used Moses, and he taught Moses a lot of stuff. Despite the fact that he was a sinner, despite the fact that he was running away from God, God showed up in the burning bush. We'll find that next week. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for the story of Moses. And as silly as it seems, it is an encouraging story to me because I'm not the only one. We're not the only one that struggled. Moses struggled. David struggled. Peter struggled. Paul struggled. Every single follower of God struggled at one point in their life. And they all learned their lesson. But the truth is, we have this written down for all eternity so that we can learn the lesson that they had to live through, that we can make the choice right now to stop going through with the sin that sometimes we just go through with because it feels good. It gives us a temporary high. It gives us a temporary feel good. But in the end, it delays the call of God in our life. And thank you that you don't disqualify us. Because if it disqualified us, all of us would be disqualified for ministry. I know I would be. But thank you that you don't disqualify us because you're the one that qualified us. But God, help us to live right. Help us do the right thing. Help us make the right choices. Help us to look to you for decision making and to trust your word, to trust your direction. We thank you for each other. We thank you for your Holy Spirit. We thank you for your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. God bless you.